I've printed out 2 copies of the fountain pen and Inkwell line drawing. This is Dala art, what I call Dala art, where I make a circle, a swooping line, and then I draw objects in the shapes and following the lines of the shapes. It's really a lot of fun. It's great for playing with design, learning how to draw better. It's just really fun. And then what you can do is paint in the shapes, playing a color scheme game. What I'm going to do today is I will use this one for the example for the bonus challenge. I have made a few changes. This is the way that you'll find it in the PDF file. And when I went to paint it, I realized that I really would like to have the ink with the fountain pen on it, because the ink creates a kind of barrier for the watercolor, where the watercolor will not bleed through the fibers of the paper when you have an ink barrier. And in doing so, I found that I had forgotten some lines, this line, so I added that line. I added some detail in here because even though this is the shadow of this pen, it just looked wrong to me. I turned it into another pen, so it's a shadow of a pen that's really another pen. You'll see that I have different angles going, and I like that a little bit better. I also added some more dots in here to bring this around visually. And because these are open spaces, it's going to make this white. I wasn't sure what to do about this. It was just a line. And I thought maybe I want to leave this white too. So I put another line making this a border. I found that that really works well. I like that. And I added this tiny little bit of the border right there. For the bonus challenge, I'm going to be working with 2 color schemes. The triad with split complements and the simple analogous, 3 colors that are adjacent to one another on the color wheel. When it comes to the analogous, since I only want to use 3 and my template for analogous, which is the number 4 template, allows you to see 5, what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap out and use the template for number 5, which is analogous with 1 complement, and I will use that and just cover that up. Let's see what color I have to use in my triad with split complements. An 8. Red-violet or violet-red. Right? So I have this choice. I have that choice. And I have that choice. I'm definitely not going to go with this choice because all 3 of these are far too close in value. Because here are the color placements. Right there, there, and there. And I don't have anything in the lighter valued areas, so I don't want to do that. This one looks pretty good. This is a yellow. I can use the lightest lights. A blue violet, which is down here, and a red violet. And I know from experience that this is a really fun palette. Right? The other one is this one, where I have the red violet, I have a green, and I have a yellow. So that's pretty much mid-tone, dark, and a light. That could be fine. I'm going to go with this one. One way to block off this part to get a simple analogous is to layer your template. Yellow is one color. I can use all 3 of these on one of my objects. And remember, my yellow-green can be much closer to yellow than it looks right here. This is just a reference. I have the red-violet. So red-violet's in the middle, red is on one side, violet's on the other. I have those 3 for another object. And I have blue-violet with blue and violet. This is a sneak peek at what is considered to be a perfect, foolproof color scheme. this is what I have. There's my blue-violet. So my analogous colors around blue-violet are violet and blue. I have red-violet. My analogous colors around red-violet are violet and red. And my analogous colors around yellow are yellow-green, yellow, and yellow-orange. This is another color scheme 7, that's made up of the 2 color schemes we're working with in this bonus challenge. In this case, we're working with them in a specific way. And you'll see, I'm going to do each object with a different color from this triad. And within each object, I will use my analogous colors to paint that in. The background will again be all one of these. So it's a little different from working directly with color scheme number 7. I'm going to do a sampling of the 6 colors, a warm and cool of each primary. There's my cool yellow. There's my warm yellow. Here's my cool blue. Show you this can get pretty dark too. There's my warm blue. My warm red. And my cool red. Now this one, I believe, is a permanent mauve. And when it's just in the pan like this, it looks very much like an alizarin crimson. That's why it's always good to label them or to check it first. I'm going to swap this out for an alizarin crimson. There is my cool red, my alizarin crimson. Why did I want to swap it out? Red and blue don't always make violet. Sometimes they make brown. Since the colors I'm using are a yellow, a blue-violet, and red-violet, I don't really want to use brown for this challenge. That means that to get the nicest violets, what do I need to do? I need to use the blue and red that are closest to each other. So I'm going to use the warm blue and the cool red. We'll get rid of these. If I were to use the permanent mauve, the one I started with, let's look and see what happens. You get beautiful violets. So that would be nice in terms of the violets. However, let's add a little bit more of the mauve. What happens when I want to go toward the red? Since I'm using an analogous section around the red-violet, I can use violet, red-violet, and red. So what happens when I get closer to red? Well, the only way to make my cool red a little bit warmer, because it doesn't look red there. If I use it straight, that would be my red. So the only way is to add some yellow to it so that it becomes more like that. But let's see what happens. Makes it kind of a brown, doesn't it? Let's see what happens when I add yellow. We'll swap this out for the alizarin crimson. And now I get a nice red. And if I have my blue, I have a much nicer transition from my violets into my red through red-violet. It's not that one is right and one is wrong. Those are the things that you learn as you work with these colors. This is the permanent mauve, which is a cool red or a red violet. You can use a permanent mauve as your cool red. Depends on what you want it to do. You don't have to remember the name. If you have a little pan of paint, all you have to do is dip water in and see what it looks like. As soon as you see that, you know that that's more of a red violet. These two, when you're looking at them this way, now it's pretty obvious, but when you're just grabbing one of these pans to throw in your kit, you might think that that's an alizarin crimson. I've often thought that was an alizarin crimson. That's why I've ended up using this as a cool red quite often, because I've made that mistake. And yeah, I call it a mistake. It's not really a mistake. I learned a lot from it. So we're putting this one away so I don't use it. That's my choice. I have a warm yellow, a cool red, and a warm blue. Now that I will make a little color wheel to see what I can end up with. So that's a really quick one that bled more than I wanted it to, but it does give me information. I can keep adding to it to get more information. All right, I have a yellow green, a yellow orange, and I have a red violet in here somewhere. There we go, red violet, and a violet. Right in there. I have a blue violet, or a violet, a blue violet, and a blue. Since I have 3 colors for each of my triad colors, that's 9 colors. However, this option overlaps. So these 3, the red, red, violet, violet, and the blue, blue, violet, violet, they both share violet. So that's 9 choices minus 1 that's overlapping. That gives me 8 choices. I can go back to this palette, which has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I can use those 10 wells to make it smaller so that you can see it. When I do live workshops, I use the large one so that you can imprint that on your brain the whole time, but it's going to be hard when I'm limited to the area of the camera. So I will put my yellow there. I'm going to make my green yellow here, or yellow green. I'll make my yellow orange there. I'll skip one. This will be my blue. This will be my blue violet. This will be my violet. This will be my red violet. This will be my red. So I'm going to go back to this palette and mix my colors and paint them from that one. The first color that I'm going to work with is my blue violet. And for that I can use blue all the way to violet. So anything in between here I can use. And I'm going to paint this fountain pen with these colors. I'm mixing my violet first. That's as far over as I'm going to go. So I'm mixing a violet that won't look like either a blue violet or a red violet. And that's pretty good. I am pulling the puddle. So this is my darkest dark in the whole painting. And I'm wicking up the extra paint. I don't want it to sit on there. I do want to get a little bit of the glow of the paper through. Before I finish this, I will be mixing up more violet for sure. It may not match this exactly, but that's perfectly fine too. I mean, this is not about rigid rules. It's about guidelines and learning what you can do. I know that you learn as much from what we think of as mistakes or things you don't like, but really I want you to discover what you can do, not be frustrated by what you can't do because I've made some silly rule about it. Now I want to make sure that the areas are dry before I go back into them. And I'm using this big brush for a reason. Normally I would use a smaller brush, but I just want to show you that you can use a big brush to get into little areas. Of course, your big brush needs to have a small point, and you can see that I'm pretty choked up on the brush. What do I mean by that? Usually I paint holding it back further, but when I have to get in these tiny areas, I really do hold it up a little closer than I would like. And I'm leaving this hole in the nib so that whatever color I paint here will come through that hole in the nib. And this is where that ink barrier that I mentioned comes in. That the ink is taken up by the fibers of the paper too, just like watercolor is. And the ink dries differently, dries the ink I'm using, which is a platinum carbon ink. It doesn't have shellac in it like an India ink does, but it does harden a bit more, so it fills the fibers, saturates the fibers, and then seals off the fibers so that the watercolor can't bleed through them. Now this, I did ink over the top of the printer ink, so I'm seeing a tiny bit of bleed in there. I don't really mind. But you'll just, depending on what kind of paper you're using or what kind of printer you used to print out the image, or if you didn't use this, if you're using your own, you won't have that issue. The color scheme game really does force you to think ahead a little bit. Once you've painted yourself into corners enough times, which you probably will by the time you get to the end of this course, you'll start to visualize what the values of the colors you're using will do. And if you only have 3, 4, 5 choices of colors, you start being more careful about where you use them. I should mention that the blue I've been using is actually the pure blue. This will be the spot for my blue violet, but I haven't made my blue violet yet. I was able to make my violet on the first shot, and I didn't realize until just now that I've been dipping into this, and you may be thinking that this is my blue violet, but it's not. It's the same as this. This is the blue. Now, I'm going to make up my blue violet now. I'm going to take a little bit of the violet I mixed so that it can't be any redder than this, and I'm adding it into the blue. Probably use up all of my violet. I just want to compare it to my blue. So there's my blue. That's not blue violet enough yet. That's a little bit more of a blue violet. Here we have the blue, we have the violet, and this is the blue violet. So you can see the variation. I hope you can see it with the camera. You do see the difference here. Now this is not the way I would normally go about this. I would put highlights and I would bring in a complementary color. You'll see at the end the effect of this, where each object is an analogous color theme, that when all the objects in the background are viewed together, that is overall a triad with split complements. So it's just another pretty interesting effect, and it's fun to play with. I'm leaving these sections of this fountain pen white for now. I may leave them white for the whole thing because this will be white. I'm not sure what these will be. I'm thinking that my background shapes, I will be using this color, which means I'll have these options for these shapes, and that will set off my objects a little bit more. Because of the way that I'm doing this and restricting the objects to being only the analogous colors, I can't make the highlight on my fountain pen either the yellow, yellow-orange, or yellow-green, which normally I would do. But I'm having fun with this challenge. I haven't done this for a long time, so this is really a treat for me. This is my straight alizarin crimson. Because red violet is one of my colors, I'm allowed to use red and violet. And I can use the reds all the way over until it starts to look like a red-orange. I've used the straight alizarin crimson, which is a cool red. On this cap of the fountain pen, I will be adding now a little bit of my warm yellow to bring my alizarin crimson closer to a warm red. And I'll add that to the cap. So I'm allowed to do that. It may look like a red-orange here only because it's next to the blue and the red. I'll do a test, a little swatch, and you'll see that it's really a red and not a red-orange yet. Yellow is not a very strong pigment when mixed with something as strong as alizarin crimson. All right, so this is bordering toward a red-orange, but this other mix I can use because that would just be a red. Because I've decided to make the background shapes using this analogous grouping, I'm going to make this the analogous using the red-violet grouping, which means that I can use red, red-violet, and violet. Notice I'm tipping my paper up. That's so that the puddle will drip down and gravity helps me. I'm working with color as value, not value as color. In working the values, I'm not trying to create a true sense of illumination. You would never know where the light's coming from when this is finished, but that doesn't matter. It's just a play of shapes. It's more of an abstraction than any kind of realistic rendering of light upon fountain pens and an inkwell. And some of the highlight areas, if I decide, when I get more of this painted in, if I decide that I need a dark, I'll make it dark. If I decide that I need a light, I'll leave it white, because I can leave it white. I can't paint it in a yellow or something, but I can leave it white. Gives you just a little bit of extra playing with using the white of paper in watercolor as one of your colors, one of your values. At this point, you can see the color scheme beginning to appear. Now, these two are tricky choices. It's really going to make a difference of whether the eye continues to flow this way or if it stops abruptly right there. I'm going to do this in the blues, blue-violets, violets, and this in the red-violet. However, I want it to be different from this one. I don't want it to look like it's just some kind of weird little leg. So I'm going to flip the colors around, and hopefully that will make this appear to be a second pen, which is what it is. Same with this. This was originally the shadow of this pen, and I sort of forgot that. So when I put in the details, I made it another pen. You know, these things happen, and you just go with it. I have pretty important choices to make now, and this is what I'm thinking. I'll be making these big background shapes within this range. Because I'm not doing graduations of color, I have to pick, will this be yellow? Will that be yellow-green? Will this be yellow-orange? Will they all be yellow? I have to make that choice before I begin. And I may change it as I see things happening. But to begin with, I want to make that choice. And I'm thinking these two need to be the same color because it doesn't make sense for them to be different. Down here, this could be different from this. Big decision. Comes with the shadows. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the shadows. I know it doesn't make sense, but I've done this before when I got stuck like this, And it turned out that making yellow-orange shadows was fabulous in the painting. Even though shadows are usually darker, I am going to go with the shadows being part of this grouping of colors. I'm going to put the shadows in first because what I don't know is what I'm going to do with these clips. That's still a mystery to me. And there's some areas that I may leave white. I may leave the clips white. This is looking a little too stark to me now, but once I get the background in, we'll see how it looks. And then I have to choose what am I going to do the border in. And will I paint in the O, the A, and the P? Probably I will. To keep my yellow, yellow-green, yellow-oranges very clean, I'm going to use a separate palette for them. When I'm working with yellows and yellow mixes, I make sure that my water is totally clean, and I use additional brushes so that I'm not polluting the yellow with red and then trying to make green with it. So I keep it really clean. Normally, I am such a messy painter. If you've seen some of my other videos where I throw paint and splatter it and I'm covered with paint, that's the way that I really work when I'm truly playing. This is the tightest and cleanest I ever am when painting. That really helped me learn about color, because otherwise I was just mixing everything up and making muck. So it is important to keep colors clean. Sometimes it's all right to let them all mix together, but when you're dealing with yellows, yellow greens, and yellow oranges, in this case, I don't want them to be neutralized. So I'm going to keep them very clean. I'll show you. I'm going to start off by putting yellows from my main yellow into these so that I'm not constantly dipping into my main source of yellow. I want to make plenty because I have some big areas. All right, now that's still a yellow-green. I wouldn't call that a green yet, and I like that. I like this olivey sort of color, and the reason for the olive color is because I'm using my ultramarine blue, my warm blue. The warm blue has a little bit of red in it, and that means that it's neutralizing my green. So now my choices for this shadow is the yellow-orange or the yellow, or I can go with a different shade of yellow-green, which is what I'm going to do. Because the orange is going to be analogous, the yellow-orange is going to be too close to being analogous with the reds and the red-violets. So I need to do a green for that too. And I didn't want it to be as shocking as the orange, yellow-orange, and then the yellow-orange would have tied these two together, and I want your eye to be able to move around, but they move around fine with the distribution of reds in here. Just enough of a difference. Not too much and not too little. Now this determines what this is going to be. I don't want it to be yellow, it would be too close to that. So I'll go yellow-orange, a little bit darker, and that's what these will be. I keep turning the page because I want the pulling action, and that's the way that my hand moves more naturally. If I force my coordination to go in a different way, then I'm not going to be able to get in these little places very well. And I still have my puddle at the very end. Now I have another idea. I may leave this white too, and I might bring a color around there. So I don't know yet. And in order to make that decision, I'll paint these two in with the yellow-orange first and see how that looks. And I may decide to go ahead with painting that yellow. I'm not sure. I'll have to take a look at the whole thing when I have this part painted in. The decisions now are going to be more difficult to make. I went ahead and painted this in green, and I'm liking that. I painted in a few of the letters, and I want some yellow there. So I'm going to close off not with a straight line, but with a curving line. I'm going to close off the ends. I'll let those dry, and I'm going to make those yellow. Then I guess I should also close off this end. Creeping up on the last few decisions. I'm liking what it's doing now, and I think I will leave that white. What I need to do is close this exit out a little bit more. So I will close in the top of the F and the E. Now that looks like a lowercase e, but that's all right. But what I probably should have done is carry that over. In fact, I can still do that. Just make it two-tone. Maybe I'll do that with the F also, because the F is looking like a P.